Welcome to Your Next Chapter, where we spotlight the creators shaping the future of podcasting. I'm Jeremiah Tittle, CEO of Next Chapter Podcasts. We're turning our attention to how live events are shaping this next chapter of the podcast industry. As someone dreaming up a podcast event in my now hometown of Ibiza here in Spain, I'm kind of springing this on my guest, but I'm going to ask some questions about what he's able to do in the live space in this podcast industry. So I'm excited to sit down with others in this industry to explore what's possible when audio meets real life connection. My guest today is Greg Hess, writer, performer, accomplished live producer in podcasting. Greg is the co-host and producer of Mega. It's a hit satirical podcast that has toured across America. And Greg has worked with Showtime, Comedy Central, Adult Swim, and has written for The New Yorker. Whether it's touring a podcast, crafting sharp satire, blending stage and audio, Greg brings deep experience creating live experiences from podcasts. And I am super happy to be sitting down talking to Greg today. It's not the first time we've met, and we'll maybe talk a little bit about why we have discussed, podcasts previously and potential collaboration. We're definitely going to dive deep into Mega because it hits super close to home. But first and foremost, Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to talk.
So, little personal for me, being raised by two pastors, but I got to hear, maybe the inception, but the concept of your show, Mega. What is it?
Well, Mega is an improvised satire from the staff of a fictional megachurch, and it is performed by myself and my partner, Holly Laurent. And we, let's see, Mega just had its 300, according to a recent listener, its 380th episode. So we've been doing it for a bunch of years now, and yeah, it's simply a comedy podcast that satirizes the world of a fictional megachurch. The inception of that was that Holly actually had been thinking about doing a podcast, had no idea what she wanted to do, and had a bunch of ideas floating around. And she had actually worked at a megachurch years and years ago. And I kept telling her, I just think that there's something to satirizing that because you know it so well, you can speak the language, as it were, of the evangelical world. And so, yeah, that was her idea to bring that then to life in terms of a podcast. And so I originally hadn't planned on doing it with her, but I did the first episode and we decided to just keep going. I play an Australian youth pastor of the youth group that is aptly named Climax.
It is, like I said, so close to home, having been exposed to a couple of different vineyard churches in my high school days. And
sure.
And so, yeah, I feel like I'm being transported in time when I listen to Mega, but it is hilarious. I'm wondering, for you, improv chops, no doubt, come into play here, but how much background information and knowledge did you have? Did you have to beef up on stuff? Did your partner have to tell you?
Strangely, I also had a ton. I'm the grandson grandson and great grandson of pastors on my dad's side, but then I studied American religious history as an undergrad, had thought about going to seminary. I was never really raised in the evangelical tradition, but I weirdly got obsessed with to nerd out, like post 1820 American religion in college. And so I went to a bunch of revivals. I did my honors thesis on essentially charismatic worship and the use of music in charismatic worship. So I had an interest in it, weirdly, and the fact that Mega has come out of a weird interest has also been helpful. So yes, improv chops, but also kind of a strange obsession with it as a young person.
That's so interesting. I was so in this world. So yeah, to be again, like transported by the podcast, but you just ride this line of the satire for sure and hilarity, but also like not in a mean way, right? Like it doesn't ever. It's always just peachy keen, like clean.
We always say that the podcast really doesn't punch down, and we love our characters even though we don't agree with them. And so we come from a satire tradition from Chicago, Second City, and we came up in Improv Olympic. And Holly always likes to say, that there was. You have to really be able to fully embody and understand your characters and the point of view that they're playing to be able to satirize them. So for us, even though there are lots of problematic things that they think, believe, and say, it doesn't mean that we are making fun of the people that believe those things necessarily, but we are able to ride that line and calling out the inconsistencies in those beliefs, even though the characters can't see those inconsistencies. And so, yeah, I don't think we'd be able to do it for 380 episodes if it was mean. And surprisingly, we get very little blowback from, I would say our listeners are probably split 50-50 between people who just love comedy and want to laugh, and then 50% of people who come from these traditions or have left these traditions or find some kind of therapy within the things that we're satirizing. And I mean, we have a lot of Christian listeners, so it's nice to be able to bring a little bit of humor to all of those point of views.
I love that. How quickly did you see a live experience from the show concept?
I think we had been doing the show 2 years before we did a live show. And the live show was a great example, I think, of how we realized, we have an audience that will show up for to see this on stage. We play characters that look very different than we do. And sometimes it's nice to hide behind the characters in the audio space. So we had some questions about how would this execute as a live show, but we've done the live shows a bunch now. We toured it a little bit. We have plans to do some more here in LA in the future, and they're a constantly evolving concept. We've really blown it out before. Had when we did it in Chicago, we had a full praise and worship band, multiple
Nice.
guests. We did it at Lincoln Hall, which is a rock club. It really had the feeling of a concert meets comedy show. And then we've also done it scaled down, where it's just the two of us and a guest and maybe a musician, and feels more like a podcast recording.
Well, you just answered a lot of the questions that I was going to ask you about that first event.
Yeah.
And kind of what the takeaways were. It's obvious that it evolved pretty quickly,
Yeah.
it sounds like.
Yeah, it did evolve. I think the takeaways for me have always been, you can make it as complicated as you want to make it. Sometimes that's really fun to add a bunch of bells and whistles to a show just for that live experience. Someone did give me some advice a long time ago that I continue to take, which is just remember that they're fans of the podcast and they want to see simply the podcast. And so you can add a bunch of things to it, but really at the end of the day, I think when people come to a live event from a podcast that they listen to, they're not necessarily looking for you to shoot a short film or something to be able to communicate the thing that they already know and love. So that's a good reminder always, I think, when sometimes I can be tempted to try to add a bunch of bells and whistles to a live experience that may or may not need to be there.
Keep it simple. I dig it. So tell me about this podcast tour, the mega podcast tour. I love how Nick Kastner, our executive producer, wrote this question. What called you to tour the podcast?
Well, we did have a higher calling to tour the podcast, I guess. The tour that we did was self-produced. We had a network of comedy theaters around the country that we had both performed in under other auspices, either when we were touring with Second City or just relationships that we had through the improv world. And I think what we were hoping is probably twofold. meet our listeners face to face in a space that felt like, I feel like our podcast does feel like a community. And it was really nice to interact with listeners. We have so many listeners who come up to us and want to talk to us about how the podcast has helped them, or specific characters or episodes that really resonate with them in terms of things that they've experienced. And so I think that was our number one goal. And then also just to expose more people to the show. I think doing it live has been a good example of getting it in front of someone who might not even be a podcast listener, but they see it pop up on a listing or something and then think, oh, that sounds funny. I want to go check it out. And we earn a listener through the face-to-face experience rather than hoping that they maybe hear an ad for Mega or something on someone else's podcast.
And then did the show experience like would you say a quantifiable audience increase during the tour? Or do you like sit back when you're done with the tour and you're like, whoa, big number jump?
That's a good question. I'm such not a quantifiable analytics guy, but I think if I went qualitative, it would be that we definitely saw an increased engagement in the people that became, even just the person who buys a t-shirt or supports us on Supercast, or I think you move someone from a passive listener into an active supporter. And I think, to me, that's the name of the game in podcasting these days. A lot of people, podcasting is a game of attrition and trying to find those people who will move from being passive listeners to actually supporting a podcast is really the challenge. And if you're not the Kelsey brothers or the Smartlist guys, and you don't have a large apparatus of ad sales and a giant audience that you're just moving either from one platform to another, I think it's all about trying to find a listener who's really actively going to say, how can I give you $5 a month or whatever that is to continue making this thing that I care about? And so for me, the live tour from Mega was a good example of just getting people more involved, getting them in the doors of the church, as it were, of, hey, yeah, you listen, but now we'll email you back when you email us, or when you have a problem with your membership or whatever, you're emailing me and Holly. You're not going to Spotify. You're not just canceling your Wondery membership or RIP or whatever that is, So I think it gives that personal feel, the mom and pop business, because that's what it is.
And now I know these type of tours do require, finding venues, the tickets, booking guests, etc. Like, I'm just curious, did you have the backing of one central organization, or it was really just bootstrapping it?
We self-produced it. Yeah, we bootstrapped it, and financially, I think we ended up in the black, but just barely. And I think that's okay. That was okay.
Yeah, exactly.
For us. And I think we have a lot of experience touring and producing live shows, and so while it was a ton of work, and maybe I might not do it that way again, it was a great way to just get our feet wet with something that was just us. And having to problem solve and book guests and all those things, which we normally do on our podcast anyway, in the live event space was like an added layer of complication and challenge. I wouldn't say it was easy or highly lucrative, but it was definitely, I think, good for the ethos of the podcast.
Any cities that stand out that you're like, after we did the tour, like people showed up outside of Joel Osteen's, like, what,
yeah,
is it like near Houston? No, where?
We were in Dallas, actually, and Texas, I will say it's easy for us to tour in places like Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles. But there is something really special about going to Dallas or Nashville, where the culture is there. They see it every single day, the type of culture that we're satirizing. The podcast is technically set in Indianapolis. And so when we do go to these smaller clubs and do 100 seats in Nashville, I do think that there's something special about going to the non-blue state, big metropolitan areas and showing up in these places where they don't really get a show like this.
Oh, that's so cool. Curious about the industry and, how the relationship between podcasting and live events has evolved since Mega first started touring. What have you seen?
I feel like we have seen the advent of big podcasts going on tour and really realizing that is a massive revenue stream. Whether that, we've worked and had a podcast over at Audio Chuck, and when I see what like Ashley Flowers has done over there, they're selling out arenas, I think, with their tour. And it is impressive to see how podcasting can break into the real event space. And so I think in the last few years, and in the next few years, you're just going to see more and more of that. The Smartless guys shot a live concert video that's now streaming on Amazon from their podcast tour. I think if you had asked me if that was going to happen 10 years ago, I couldn't have even wrapped my head around somebody touring MSG or something with a podcast. So I think that's a good thing, to be honest, in the space, because it's hard to sell a ticket these days. It's really hard, especially post-pandemic. And you don't have the same commitment to buying tickets ahead of time. You have a lot of, I think it's just apathy around showing up for live events. It's very hard. Anybody, I tell anybody that if you're selling a ticket to your show these days, it's a real accomplishment, and it's very challenging. It's much harder than it was pre-2020 to get somebody out of their house, out of a virtual space and into a theater or a club. So, hats off to that. And I do think that the growth of live podcasting and doing live event podcasting is great in general for the space.
The last industry question I wanted to ask you is about what kind of show do you think should consider live events and which should not, in your opinion?
I don't know if I'm the one to ask this question. I have my personal opinion about this, but I think it kind of has to come from the creator of what is your comfort level doing to being live and in front of people. Part of our podcast is the warts of the podcast are something to celebrate. It's something to celebrate in improv in general. The so-called mistakes, the you had to be there moments are so fun for our listeners. And I think if you are on a highly produced podcast that really flourishes via its control, I think live is not necessarily the place to lean unless you have a highly attuned, highly scripted, or highly produced show. I think maybe I'll just flip the question and say anyone who gets to celebrate the realness, rawness, or unedited sort of version of a podcast, that is a podcast that listeners will enjoy live because they're seeing it in real time. And so, I think maybe I would just say if that appeals to you on a podcast and you like having that as part of your podcast, then that's something that seems like it resonates with people in a live space.
That's cool. I think the most fun I've had in a live podcast situation was Just for Laughs, the 500. Honestly, every time we've done a live one, we did down in Moon Tower, even down in Austin, Moon Tower Comedy Festival, and Big J Okerson, the Sklar brothers, and one, I forget which brother goes to Burning Man and the other one doesn't.
Randy goes, and I think Jason stays. Yeah, it's funny. I just talking to them moments ago.
Are you serious? That's hilarious. Mm-hmm. And Josh, doing just some Burning Man dance on stage, something that I don't think we even did video back then. It was very early days of the podcast. But it's just one of those things, capturing that in a room I mean, even with video, it's still like there's nothing like that in person, tangible
Totally.
energy.
Comedians too. I feel like it's just another avenue to be able to do what you do anyway. Those guys are incredible stand-ups, but you're going to get a touch of their stand-up prowess watching them sit around and do bits with their friends. And that's hopefully something the same way with improv podcasts. I feel like, improv is best enjoyed in a live space. So it's nice to make it a live show.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. So I didn't give you a heads up about this. I'm going to ask you to give me advice about this podcast conference idea to do here in Spain. But
Cool.
I wanted to get to how we know each other because we were talking, you and Joey. Can you just break down the show? Because it's such a cool concept, and I'd love to know more about where you're at with it.
Yeah, so I'm producing a new show. It's called Like Minds, and it's with my friend Joey Bland, who's a 2-time Jeopardy champion and also someone I've improvised with since we were actually in college together. So over 20 years of improv experience. And we used to actually run a live show in Chicago where he would essentially write a pub quiz, but it was highly influenced by improv. So he would get a suggestion from the audience and then the next week write a quiz inspired by that suggestion. And it would go in all sorts of different places. There was performance elements to it. And I just always had it in the back of my mind that it would be a good podcast. And so we started doing it as a live show first, again in LA, and recording those, and then have just recently moved it to both a live show and a podcast. So sort of going about it in an opposite direction, which was live show first, podcast second. We're on our 14th episode, I think. And so it's cooking along. We've been featured on Apple, this month, and as a new show that they're excited about. And so we've seen a nice bump from that. And then like any of these things, one feeds the other. So, we do it monthly and we do it monthly in LA, but we also live stream that show. And so we've seen a nice, there's a simpatico relationship between a podcast listener who now gets to go and say, oh my God, I would love to see that live. I don't live in LA. I can also watch the live stream, buy a ticket for that.
Cannibalism be damned.
I
love that.
I know.
Do all the things. See what sticks. I mean,
we make it ourselves. I produce it. I have one editor on it, and that's basically it. And for us, that's been a great testament to just do it, see if there's traction. And then it has been nice because as a small team, we're able to monetize it pretty quickly and at least have the live show support what we're doing in the podcast space too.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll give a quick shout out to our strategic partnerships lead, Alex Schaefert, and our production director, Pete Musto. Big fans of you and Joey and everything that all the creative stuff that you do. So I know we just really loved talking to y'all and discussing, how we might be able to work together. But I just love seeing smart, fun, funny people succeed. So it's cool for me to just hear the latest on all this stuff. So
heck yeah.
Thanks for sharing. And I hope people check out not just Mega, but Like Minds for sure.
Definitely.
If you're in LA, go. If not, buy a ticket and watch it live and consume it that way. But I did have one more Mega question that I forgot to get to. Righteous Gemstones.
Uh-huh.
What is your overall? It's obviously different from what you're doing because they are very mean and show a very ugly.
It's funny you bring that up. A lot of people, because Mega obviously predates Righteous Gemstones by a couple of years, but I would say Mega is to The Office, whereas Righteous Gemstones is almost is more like a. I mean, it is a satire, I guess, but there's a part of me that kind of feels like it could be anything. It doesn't actually have to be a church as the backdrop. I think my critique of it is that we try to play it almost as straight as possible, whereas that's televangelism too. And sorry to split hairs for people who probably don't care, but yeah, our mega church is more like the corporate Justin Bieber version of Christianity that you see sort of peddled all the time now, and theirs is more of a harkening back to that televangelism, Jim Bakker and all that sort of stuff. So they're swimming in the same pool, but I would say they're two different kinds of fish.
Yeah, I think the authenticity of what you do, like it's just like it's so close to reality and so believable that it's, whereas when you're talking about righteous gemstones, it's so ridiculous.
It's very over the top, and we have over the top stuff too, but we do play it as if it is, truly real. But yeah, I enjoy it. And as long as I like that comedy's being made, because it's not being, a lot of comedy is not being made these days.
So you're not suing Roughhouse Pictures is what I'm hearing. You're not going
not yet.
for
Not yet.
Steal it all from you.
Retain counsel, Roughhouse Pictures.
Awesome. Okay. So here's the part that I did not prepare you for, but
sure.
Since moving to Spain, to Ibiza, I have been here for a year, a couple months now, and have met some folks. There's a outside, I think, an external image and brand of what this island is all about, which is, you could say, all true, but it's not the only thing. There's the other side, quote unquote, of Ibiza. There's a lot of wellness people, a lot of yoga being done here. It's there's people that are there's a lot of community around alternative health, you might say, which also is very much thriving in podcasting. So I've had this idea, possibly because I've been stuck in Spain and I'm not allowed to leave currently given my visa situation, but I was thinking about starting a conference here, a podcast conference. It could start as small as a meetup. It could grow into something, more formidable. I feel like it is a desirable destination. I went to enough conferences this past spring, mostly podcast conferences, and that it made me think, why not? Why not do it here? Also, the fact that London, I really have enjoyed the podcast show. In May, I've gone the last 2 years. And then I'm thinking, well, what about the rest of Europe, or what about some other places? And so I've been in R&D mode, fact finding, and I'm just wanted to ask you a couple questions because you've done live events and obviously a veteran in the podcast space. What questions should I be asking myself at this early stage?
I think the first question I might ask is, who is it for in podcasting? And that might sound, maybe I should just clarify, which is, sometimes I obviously have seen a lot of these podcast conferences. I've never been to one. They always seem a little bit overwhelming to me, whether it's a combination of buyers, networks, gear, creators, and it always seems to me like it has a one-size-fits-all thrust to it. And there's something that's actually not that interesting to me about that. So I think sometimes I'm always wanting to have something that's highly specific to the types of problems that I'm solving or the type of people that I want to connect with. And whether that would be like other podcast creators, that to me seems like, oh, I would actually like to interface with other podcast creators. Or maybe it is just like, look, this is all about the monetizing your podcast, like, or how to be a bit better manager of your own small business. And like you said, there's wellness people, there's yoga people. I'm sure there's an audience for, hey, we're wellness people working in the audio space. I mean, that's probably a real strong niche, I think. So that might be my first question of, who is it for specifically? Because Ibiza seems like an amazing place to have that conference. And if you want to invite me, I'll be there, whether it's for wellness people or not.
One of the first invitations going out to Greg Hess.
I'll take it.
That's a fact.
I burn I'm not great in the sun, so I will be in the full sunblock. But
I have become that. I'm always undercover because it'll melt you or scorch you out here. Yeah, I mean that's the main question I have really. I mean, I'm like pulling at a couple strings here. I mean, I don't suppose you've ever held a conference, but you've done all these live events. So, my first thought when Mark Maron was hanging up his microphone for WTF was, oh, let's get Mark Maron out here. He'd probably love coming to Spain or whatever. And then as time has gone on and I've wrestled with this idea more and more, I think your question is even more important to ruminate on, because just bringing, this super famous actor and comedian, a podcaster here, like, is anybody going to even know who this guy is? Like, you have to think about, are we trying to bring all of America here? Are we trying to, leverage, the people that are here, the audience that already exists here that might be interested? And because more and more people I meet, they're into biohacking and Andrew Huberman and all this stuff that's playing well in this kind of alternative health space. So that's kind of been shifting in that direction, even though I love comedy personally.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I want to bring some comedians too. So I don't know. I don't want to get my own personal kind of interests in the way of what might make a good cohesive like approach.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like conferences to me are always two sides of a coin, of having a good experience where you're connecting with other people of like mind. I'm trying to just sneak the name of the podcast in there. Yeah. We were talking, just to use an example, to SporkleCon this year, which is like the giant trivia conference in Chicago. And, to me, that's like, it's just trivia heads meeting, playing games, doing pub quizzes, watching shows. But that common theme of trivia and cons in general, I think is such such a massively successful space, and tapping into audiences, or I guess you could call them just like the participants that are very dedicated, is such a cool idea. And so, yeah, I think either of those things, whether it's comedy or wellness, it's like there is like a hardcore dedicated audience who will show up for that stuff. Always question like comedy, like in Europe, comedy doesn't export like it in like wellness does, but I guess the right comedians at the right place, I think could sound attractive to me.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me a little feedback. I'm just polling the studio audience and the various guests who come on your next chapter, but grateful for you to come on the show today, join me today. Is there anything else that you would want to promote? Or, I mean, the last thing I ask all my guests is, what's your next chapter? What do you got cooking? What do you want to share with the folks listening?
I'm always in a constant state of pivoting. Right. And I think that's what you have to do these days as someone who makes stuff for a living, whether it's in TV or film or podcasting or the written word. But, something I'm really excited about is, before, or actually I guess during Mega, and I worked on a show called Live from Here, which was, an NPR and American Public Media show that took over for Prairie Home Companion. That was a big live national tour. And that has kind of spawned some other things like that. I'm working on the Audible show for the Punch Brothers now, which is called the Energy Curfew Music Hour. That'll be coming. The second season will be coming out. So that's a live podcasty. It's basically a live podcast concert, and so that's coming out, 6 episodes, I think, in the next few months. And then I'm also about to take a live country music variety show on the road that It's called The Good Country Good Time. So also in that variety tradition, with the hopes of doing a podcast or some ancillary material that will benefit the live show. So always trying to sneak in some kind of podcast in any sort of live show that I'm doing.
You are prolific, Greg. And,
Thank you.
It's really cool to get to know you a little bit better, ask some of these questions that have been circling around my head, and just grateful for the time today. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Good luck.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Your Next Chapter. I'm your host, JT. Our executive producer is Nick Kastner, edited by Justin Cortese, and we drop episodes bi-weekly. Please follow the show, and thanks so much for listening.